an understanding that Al-Qaeda is not the only terrorist or jihadist or militant extremist Islamist movement out there that we're fighting. Yes, it's imperative that we name not all Muslims, but the jihadist, militant extremists not only in Al-Qaeda, and those around the world that everything will be more here. And this brings me to the second policy prescription. These public pronouncements. The importance of these public pronouncements cannot at all be minimized. Our president, as well as other leaders, local and national, as well as those speaking not in English, but in French, and in German, and in Swedish, and in Arabic, need to go on record and speak to the world and their own people about the importance of the values that we share and hold dear, and not to be mealy-mouthed and be afraid to use the T word, to be afraid to define those jihadists as our common enemy. That is the second most important issue that I believe comes out of an understanding of Israel, its relationship to America, and the importance that we share in confronting these enemies. The third thing I would say is that we have to, all of us, insist on accuracy in the language we use. Whether it's in the media, which is my focus, whether it's by our politicians or on our college campuses, it's imperative that the language that we use reflects the reality and not be held hostage by propagandists from the other side of this worldwide effort to confront these jihadists. My last two things are perhaps the most important. We have to have policies which have teeth when confronting these issues. We have to use every means at our disposal, short of, and eventually, if necessary, including military. But here I'm talking about those non-military means that we can leverage for these purposes. Aid, trade, recognition, even just of the Palestinians, let alone the government of Pakistan, Afghanistan, or others. The leverage that we have, for instance, with those leaders in terms of their policies on these issues is not used at all. The kind of political leverage we could use in forums like the UN or UNESCO or the World Trade Organization has not been used. We need to give teeth to these policies to show those who oppose freedom, liberal democracy, and what everything that our both Judeo-Christian tradition and other moderates, even in the Islamic world, stand for, that we will stand by those policies and we will use every means at our disposal to promote them. And lastly, I think, and this is something that I almost beg of the American administration, from whichever party it may be, we need to recognize that America uniquely has the ability and the responsibility to lead the free world in our effort to confront those who oppose everything that we stand for. Without American leadership, the world may well be lost. So what can you do? And then I know we have to leave time for questions. What can you do? I would say very simply. 3 levels of what I would call advocacy, public diplomacy. On the individual level, with your friends and your colleagues, with those you chat with over dinner or those you meet with in different meetings like these. These issues should be on your radar, on your agenda. And here I stand before you not only as an Israeli. Of course, I would like to hear you speaking with your friends, with your colleagues, about the importance of supporting Israel, but also as an American. Precisely because Israel is so much so the spearhead of the fight that we join together. Aside from on the personal level, on the level of the local politicians, the local media, those like Pete who support us, stand with us. But they need your support as citizens of Mountain View or San Jose, citizens of California, citizens of the United States, letting your local council people, your state senators and assemblymen, as well as your congressmen, senators, and the administration know how you feel about these issues. And then we come to the media. There is no more important influencer of our public policy today then those journalists and those columnists who bandy about those terms that I was referring to before so casually, who affect the policies made by our national as well as our local governments, and there I believe that your role is crucial. Reach out to the media. Don't only write letters to them when you're angry at them for something either local or domestic or health or economic policy or foreign policy related to Israel. Reach out to them beforehand. Pete and I were just talking about this before our meeting tonight. Pete and I were talking about how we share an approach to the media, looking at them as friends, as colleagues, as professionals, where we sit down with them. Pete in terms of the local media here in San Jose, I in terms of the foreign media who are based in or visiting Israel, and take them out to lunch and chat with them and talk about what interests them. And if you do that with the foreign editor, for instance, of the San Jose Mercury News, you may find out, just for instance, that he's, I don't know, a real aficionado of good wines from Napa Valley, let's say. Now this happens to be a subject I'm very, very interested in. I make wine in Israel. And I can tell you that Israel today, over the last decade, has become one of the most respected producer of fine wines in the world. Now, you should all taste Israeli wines, by the way, without question, rivaling the Napa wines, and I won't say they're better. But my point here is very subtle. If the foreign editor of the San Jose Mercury News doesn't know that Israel is a maker of fine wines, then he's missing an important part of the story about Israel. To take perhaps a better example, if he was, let's say, an avid soccer fan, it might be beneficial to point out to him that 50% of the soccer, since we're just finished with the World Cup now, that 50% of the soccer players in Israel's National Soccer League are Arab Muslims. That a few years ago, for the first time, a team from the Arab town of Sachni in Israel won our national soccer championship. Why is this important? Because most people don't know that 20% of Israel's citizens are Arab Muslims. Most people don't recognize how democratic and pluralistic and open and liberal and tolerant Israel's society is. And if the foreign editor of the San Jose Mercury News were to see Israel through that lens, as opposed to the normal, usual, politically correct understanding of Israel as the Goliath in its fight against the Palestinian David, or Israel as the oppressor, or Israel as a militaristic society, to understand that aspect of Israel's society, whether it's wine or democracy, opens up a journalist's eyes to the reality which is Israel. And the fact is, if we as a group are so efficient, shall we say, are so committed not to accept the politically correct wisdom of the day with regard to health policy, with regard to financial reform, all the political correctness that exists today with regard to domestic society, so too with domestic policy, so too we should be as staunchly opposed to the acceptance of political correctness in the depiction of issues so central to our country's foreign policy, including, or I would say, for my purposes, starting with the issue of Israel. I can only close by saying that I really believe, I truly believe, that peace will come to the Middle East. I argued earlier today with our friends, with Richard, as we were talking before the event, the question of whether or not there can be defined an anti-Israel trend in this administration. And I said something I think which is very important to share with you today. I don't believe that the majority of the leadership of either party in America, including the Democratic Party, is anti-Israel. I do believe that there's a fundamental misconception reflected by the thought experiment we did together just now, a misperception that suggests, starting my remarks with, that Israel is somehow responsible for the lack of peace in the Middle East, that Israel's settlement policy, or Israel's presence in the territories, or Israel's policies vis-a-vis the Palestinians in Gaza are somehow the main obstacles to the Middle East. I believe that that misperception misses the very real fact